Hi, this is Rabbi Chaim Coffman. Welcome to our 74th installment of the Torah portion of the week. We're holding by Parshas Ki Tissa. Beginning of the parsha speaks about the machatzita shekel, the half shekel coin that was given in order to uphold and keep the tabernacle going, which became the Beis HaMikdash, which became the temple, and the money was for the upkeep for the for the animals that were sacrificed, etc. Also, the parsha speaks about the laws of Shabbos, and the parsha speaks about what we're going to speak about is the sin of the golden calf. So, if you look at Exodus chapter 32, right, at the beginning of the sin of the golden calf, the Torah says that the people saw Moshe had delayed descending the mountain, and the people gathered around Aaron and said to him, "Rise up, make for us gods that will go before us." There was man Moses, or Moshe, who brought us up from the land of Egypt. We do not know what became of him. So that's verse 1, right? It's all one verse. So here's the beginning of what basically transpired, right? We had that Moshe Rabbeinu gets delayed, or they think he gets delayed. They made a miscalculation. The Jewish people make a miscalculation. So because of that, they say, "Oh, Moshe's not here. Let's have another god in front of us. Let's make a god in front of us." And they have this calf. Aaron, who is trying to get the people to, is trying to delay them from doing anything. So he tells the women to give over their jewelry, and by giving over the jewelry, he said, "Oh, it'll take a while for that to happen. This, that. So hopefully, Moshe will come back." So they gave over their jewelry. They throw the jewelry in the fire, and out comes this calf that starts to walk, starts to talk, starts to graze, so to speak. So it was tremendously miraculous, in what happened. Now we have to understand the severity over there. There are a lot of questions, right? The first question is, how could they have been so great? That generation who saw God face to face, whether it was the first of the 10 Commandments or the first 2 of the 10 Commandments, and then they died because the experience was too great, then they came back to life, or where they heard all of the 10 Commandments. You're talking about the greatest generation in the history of man. So that being true, since they saw the miracles in Egypt, they saw the manna that was given, their clothes didn't wear out, the sea split, they saw the plagues. What's going on here? How could they have sinned? How could they have sinned with this golden calf? How could they have forgot that the Torah says, "Anochi Hashem Elokecha"? I am the Lord your God. You shall have no other gods before me. Oh, slipped their mind. How in the world could this have, slipped their mind? What in the world was going on? What were they thinking? Right? That is really the question. How in the world they could have thought that this is the God that took us out of Egypt. So it says, Mori v'Rebbe Aravagon Ramoshe Star Moshlita. He should be well. He brings down in his work on Chumash called Chochma V'Daz. And he says that the commentators, the Meforshim, over there have a difficulty time explaining what in the world's going on. So he says, he wanted to say like this, that they had no doubt that God was one, that there were no other gods, and He's the one who created the world. He's the one that interferes in history, just like He took them out of Egypt. He's the one in charge. But according to them, God does not deal with this world. He's too lofty. He's too busy up there dealing with nature, taking care of the universe, and He's too busy to deal with this world. Therefore, God put someone in this world who was Moshe Rabbeinu. And what did Moshe Rabbeinu do? He was the leader, right? He was the leader. He told them what to do, and that's what they did. So, when the Jewish people accepted him as the leader, in their eyes, Moshe was like a god. Because look at all these miracles that he did. All right, you'll say maybe that's a form of idolatry as well. Maybe it's avodah zarah, because they're giving him more credibility than he had. Because in essence, Moshe Rabbeinu only has power because God gave it to him. And no one can contradict the prophecy of Moshe. Why? Because God gave a stamp of approval. God spoke to Moshe, Moshe wrote it down. Moshe is just a scribe. If Moshe is just a scribe and he gets his stamp of approval from God, you cannot contradict, cannot go against what Moshe did. So therefore, anybody, even if they do miracles, right, can be a false prophet if they contradict anything that Moshe did. And where does Moshe's credibility come from? God himself. So you go against Moshe, you go against God. But the mistake they made is that they saw him as a leader, and through Moshe, all these miracles occurred. And not only that, he went up to the mountain 40 days, right? In 40 nights, they just made a mistake in the calculation. So he's almost like God himself. So when Moshe didn't come back, what did they think? They think that God took him. And so they need someone else. They need someone else in his place to lead him like another God. So since they made a mistake in the date when they thought he was coming back, so they figured, okay, God decided to take him. Right? How long can a person last? No food, no water. Right? 40 days gone by, or 39 according to them, whatever the case was. So God took them, but what did they want? They want another leader. They want someone else that is going to lead them. So they want a leader. Someone, is going to take over. So even though they thought Moshe would come back, now you have to keep in mind also the Medrash says, the Satan, the evil inclination, the Melech HaMaves, angel of death, whatever you want to kill him, whatever you want to call him. Nonetheless, what did he do? He made a vision for the people to see that looked like Moshe had died. So at this point, the Jewish people are on the highest level they've ever been on, that the world has ever been on, from before Adam and Eve ate from the tree of knowledge. Now, this is an unbelievable thing. They brought the world back to where it was, and then shortly thereafter, after getting the 10 Commandments, they sinned with the golden calf, even though this happened much earlier. The Torah's not necessarily written in the order everything happened. It's written out of order. It's not a contradiction, just means it wasn't written down exactly when it happened, and that will answer up a number of questions, as Rashi says, and others hold, that there's no mukdam or muchar b'Torah. It's not like, an earlier part, a later part. The things happen when they happen. This doesn't necessarily mean it was written down, exactly when it happened. So the Jewish people, they see that seemingly that Moshe Rabbeinu is dead. So they want a leader. They want someone. They want something or someone to be the leader. Now it's interesting, even though they thought Moshe Rabbeinu was going to come back any day, right, which he was, they just made a mistake in the calculation. So if that would have been the case, if they didn't think he was coming back, then why didn't they appoint Aaron Nachor or Yoshua? Right? Why didn't Jewish people appoint one of them? So it must be they didn't appoint them because they thought he was coming back. So they said, in the meantime, let us make a shore, an ox. Why an ox? Right? Why specifically an ox? Because an ox is part of the Kisei HaKavod. He's on one of the corners of God's heavenly throne. This image of an ox. So they figured, since it's on the bottom, it's on one of the sides of the Kisei HaKavod, God's heavenly throne, so we'll make an ox. Right? It's one of the Niflos HaBorei. It's one of the great creations that God made. So, therefore, since it's one of God's great creations, so we'll make an ox. What's the big deal? They had great joy, they had dancing, etc. And we call that in the vernacular when you give something power that it doesn't have, and you worship that, that's called idolatry, right? That is called avodah zarah, one of the big three, that a Jew, anytime, any place, has to give up their life for. Now, in this case, right, it's idolatry, but they believed in God. They believed God created the world. They believed God intervened in history because they saw it with their own eyes. But they wanted an intermediary of something of gold and silver, right? Why? Why specifically something like that? Because all the other nations had their own gods as well. So they will be like everybody else, right? We'll be idolaters like them. No, what's the difference? The difference is we believe that God created the world. We believe that He's in charge. It's just we'll have an intermediary, right? Just like everybody else. Everything else is really idolatry because they give it power that it doesn't have. We really believe in the true God. Even if you believe in the true God, the one who created the world, the one who intervenes in history, He took the Jewish people out, that is still called idolatry. Right? That is the nuance over here. Because even if you believe in God, and you believe in everything He's done, and up until this point, once you put someone else with Him, or you take Him out of the picture, and you put an intermediary there, whether it's an angel, whether it's a statue, whether it's a totem pole, doesn't matter what it is, that intermediary, even if you believe God created the world, is called idolatry. And that's forbidden. As the Rambam, he says, my Rebbe points out, the Rambam explains that was their understanding. That was their mistake. Their mistake was they thought God was too lofty for this world. They didn't deny He created the world. They didn't deny He has influence and He runs everything and that God is nature. God takes care of the world and sustains it. But they thought He's too lofty to deal with us here. And therefore they need an intermediary. So what happened? So this act of making this calf, this ox, right, in the form of an ox, that it was formed by great miracles. Right, this ox ate grass, walked by itself, right, coming out of the fire. Pretty unbelievable. Now, it is interesting who did this, right? Who was guilty of doing this? So it's brought down that the Erev Rav, the mixed multitude, they're the ones that converted, whether they were the Egyptians that converted in Egypt and then came with the Jewish people, or could be there are other peoples of other nations that converted. So discrepancy exactly who they were. Nonetheless, God tells Moshe Rabbeinu it's not a good idea to take them out. Moshe Rabbeinu says, I don't care. I want to, let's take them out. God says, fine. And many times God says, your people, not my people. Why? Because these are the people that caused the sin of the golden calf. And how did they cause it? Through sorcery. So, once this ox was formed, this calf was formed, they had great joy, right? They danced, they sang. Again, on simple explanation, the commentaries bend over backwards to try and show why this is not idolatry. Now, they're not trying to say, look how great these people are, etc. What they're trying to say is, how could it be that they thought that, this calf took them out of Egypt? How could they think that this calf has that type of power? Right? Normally, we would call that idolatry. But the reality is, they wanted a leader. They wanted some sort of intermediary. Did they really believe that this calf has got this supernatural power, took them out of Egypt, and that, Moshe Rabbeinu was gone, though he didn't do anything? No. Did they not believe in God? No. Right, but they made a fundamental mistake. An absolute fundamental mistake. So the commentaries, if you look at the language, in the Torah itself, so there are ways to interpret it where Jewish people don't look so bad. They didn't really believe that it was a god. That took them out. There are many different nuances. In the Torah, the way the commentaries learn that, that they didn't think it was their God. One example is they wanted to make a holiday for the next day, right? They wanted to make sacrifices for the next day. So Aaron delays them and says, they say let's make this holiday. We'll sacrifice. But what did they say? They said we're going to sacrifice Lashem. We're going to sacrifice to God, not to the calf. They would have said we're going to sacrifice to the calf. That's idolatry, right? That is definitely idolatry. But they didn't say that. So there are other nuances. We're not going to go into it. We're not going to go into it now. But there are many other nuances where we could say, they didn't really look that bad. Their intention wasn't good, right? It certainly doesn't seem like their intention was good. But to call it outright idolatry, right? So many of the commentaries say it wasn't. Some of them say it is. If you look at, if we didn't have a running commentary, we didn't have any other information, and you look at the simply what the text says. All you Karaites out there, you're gonna love this. You look at what the text says, 100% it's idolatry. Right? That's what we would say. Because that's the way it looks. Problem is, when you have other information, and you know other things, it's a little bit hard to say that. Because of everything that happened before. Again, this is the single greatest generation in the history of man. So when we see what they did, they complain in the desert, right, that they want steak, they want quail, they want watermelon, they miss the watermelon in Egypt, they want fish, they miss all these things. It's very hard to understand what is going on when we realize who these people were. Right? When we realize they saw the miracles, they saw the plagues in Egypt, they saw the sea split, they saw manna come every day, double portion on Friday. Right? They didn't get anything on Shabbos. Their clothes never wore out. So many different miracles. You want to say that they believed this calf was God? That this calf took them out of Egypt? Most likely you'll tell me, question is better than the answer. That's probably true. But the question is a very, very fundamental, difficult question to fathom. Because of who we're dealing with. So the people are happy, they're dancing, and the problem is, obvious problem is that it's considered a merit. It's considered a rebellion against God himself, because they're taking God out of the picture. Right? Even if they didn't fully believe this thing took them out of Egypt, and they really believe God created the world and God intervenes in history, this is still considered a merit. It's a rebellion. It certainly looks bad. So when God says later, God's going to say, I can't go amongst the Jewish people because if I do, I'm going to wipe them out. So Moshe Rabbeinu says, wipe me out of your book. Commentaries say that means the book of life, not the book of the Torah. Wipe them out of the book of life. So God takes them out of Parshas Tissa, right? Parshas Tissa, which we read last week. Nonetheless, when we look at it, so God makes a compromise with Moshe. Moshe convinces God, don't wipe out the Jewish people. Because God says, if I go amongst the Jewish people, the commentaries tell us, it means I'm going to wipe them off the face of the map. Now, we all agree that's bad. So Moshe Rabbeinu is able to invoke God's attribute of kindness, of chesed, right? That God has compassion. So God says, fine, I won't wipe them out. I'll send a messenger, send an angel in front of them to lead them, etc. It won't be me, because if I go amongst them, there won't be anything left. Even so, the commentaries tell us that each generation gets some sort of punishment for the sin of the golden calf for all future generations. Now, that's good and bad. It's good because Jewish people don't get wiped out. Because God wanted to start a new nation from Moshe himself, and he doesn't wipe out the rest of the Jewish people. Right? Even though God wanted to, Moshe convinces him not to. And God doesn't. So God says, fine, I won't wipe out the rest of the people. But every generation, there's going to be payback. Well, that's bad. Because payback's never good. No one ever wants to suffer the consequences. But every generation is going to suffer some aspect of the sin of the golden calf. Now, we mentioned before what happened. Where was the world at this point before this calf came along? The world was at the highest level it had ever been since before Adam and Eve ate from the tree of knowledge. Now that's pretty darn right impressive. Right? The world's never been to that point. Before. So this whole thing brought the world back to where it was and caused tremendous damage, spiritual damage, to the extent that God says that I should really wipe out all the Jewish people and start with Moshe. Start again. Instead, God has compassion. And his compassion is, I'm going to pay back every generation for the sin of the golden calf. Now, we should be whistling Dixie at that, because otherwise we wouldn't be here. Right? We probably wouldn't be here. So that is, somewhat of a consolation. Because the alternative is, we're not here. So each generation pays for this sin. And that is tremendous compassion. Now, another thing we have to keep in mind, as we ask the question, how could such a great generation fail over here? So the Rebbe points out as well, he says you have to keep in mind, a person is created to what? To work. Meaning, not just physical work, spiritual work. Right? He's got a fight on a regular basis. He's got a fight between his evil inclination and his good inclination. If he does the right thing, he elevates his soul, he elevates his body. If he does the wrong thing, he debases his body and his soul. So it's a constant fight. So, over here, they were so overcome by the nace, by the miracle of what happened, that, since this egel, since this calf was made out of gold, and it lived, and it ate, and it came out by itself, evil inclination convinced them, this must be what God wanted. This must be Ratzon Hashem. Exactly what God had planned. Exactly what God desired. I mean, that would make sense. Why, if that happened, isn't it because God wanted it to happen? So, the answer is that the evil inclination, can convince us that even what we think is the greatest thing could actually be bad. It can convince us just the opposite. How many people, God forbid, should ever be in such a situation? How many people would say if a person's suffering, if a person's suffering tremendously, they're on a respirator, and the person said, okay, this person's had enough, whether it's a parent, whether it's a sibling, or whatever the case is, and say, you know what? We're going to put them out of their own misery. They are suffering tremendously. Why should a person have to suffer so much? We're going to play God and go, pull out the plug. Well, within Judaism, if you do that, in most cases, that will be considered murder. Doesn't matter, you pull the plug, shoot him in the head, whatever it is, that would probably be considered murder. Now, so why do I bring that up? I'm not going to get into the aspect of euthanasia, but I bring it up for one reason, and that is if we look at that situation, the person looking at it says, look, this person's suffering tremendously. This person doesn't need to suffer. Let's end it or quicken it so they don't suffer as much and they die. Now, according to the Torah, you can't do that. According to the Torah, that's murder. Now, we may think we're doing the right thing. We may think we're helping the person. Our evil inclination, and that's what it is, it may come from a good side in a certain way. Because we may think we're so altruistic. Look, we're trying to help them. We don't want them to suffer. Right? I'm not into people suffering, so don't miss the point over here. But it doesn't give us the right to play God, even though it comes from a purely good intention. Nonetheless, that intention is antithetical to Torah. It's wrong and it's murder. But I have the right intention. I have the greatest of intentions. So what? What do I care what your intention is? Halachically speaking, am I permitted to do it or not? We'll give another example. Let's say somebody doctors know is going to die. Right? So what happens? Let's say the person has a pacemaker. He's got a pacemaker. And, and the kids or a relative or whoever says, this person suffered too much. We're going to cut off the pacemaker. What happens? Cut off the pacemaker, he dies. Now the only question is that called murder or not? Why? Because if the person's going to die anyway, what did you just do? You hastened his death. In other words, if he's going to die in 6 to 12 hours and he dies in 2, you hastened his death. If you hasten a person's death, in the vernacular terms, they're no different. You shoot him in the head. That's murder. You're coming from a place of love. Right? No one's going to pull the plug or do something like that if they hated the person. They hate the person, they just shoot him. Right? Well, if you don't have access to a gun, it might be a little bit harder. But, alright, let's just say, for argument's sake, it's coming from a place of love. They want to help the person. They don't want to see the person suffer. And it's very, very hard to see somebody we love suffer. So that being the case, it's still an evil inclination. Even if it comes from, the purest of thoughts, because what you're doing is the wrong thing. You're actually murdering them. And it could be they have to suffer at the end of their life or whenever it is in order to get their portion in the next world. We have no idea how these things work. Right? I've told the story. Someone was on a respirator, and the kids tell the doctor, pull the plug. Doctor pulls the plug. The patient dies. Patient comes back to the doctor in a dream, and he says, you murdered me. I was sitting here waiting. I could have got my portion in the next world. It's a few more days. Now I'm in hell. I'm in Gehenna, and I'm suffering. It's all your fault. You're a murderer. Like all this. The person had the dream a few times. And this Jewish doctor, eventually became an Orthodox Jew because of it. But, a person sitting there lying in a coma, you think, person suffering, look what they're going through, let's just end it, we'll take care of it now. We have no idea what's going on. Right? This person's suffering exactly for that reason. Because the soul has to go through it in order to get a better ticket the next world. That's what suffering helps. Suffering takes away a lot of transgression. So it's beneficial. We're not masochists. We don't want it. But that's how it works. It wipes out tremendous negative things that we do in this world. So if a person's sitting there, obviously you don't want to see anyone die, and it's tremendously sad for us and what they go through. But that could be this person's olam haba. This is their portion in the world to come, and now you just shortened it. Now this story I heard from the person told it himself. It wasn't through a third party. It wasn't 500 years ago. It was a recent story. So, I'm always fond of saying we have no idea what we see in this world. As the Talmud tells us, one of the rabbis goes upstairs. They asked him when he came back, "What did you see?" So he said, "I saw an upside down world. The people who are on the bottom in this world are doing very well in the next world. People who are on top of this world ain't doing so good in the next world. It's what we call an olam hafuch, right? It's the opposite, right? It's an opposite world, or what we'll call in Aramaic alam de shikra. It is a world of falsehood. What we see, we have no idea. It's all fantasy." Right? Even though we have to live and we have to survive and everything else, what we see, we do not know. We do not fathom. Most of it does not make any rational sense. It's not for us to make rational sense. It's us to live the best we can as a Jew, or as a non-Jew doesn't want to convert, right? Since they don't have to convert. But we have to do what is God's will. And there's only one way to do that. He gave us a blueprint. The blueprint is called the Torah. But the Torah was given with instructions. That's what it is. It's a book of instructions. But without any, running commentary, the book reads very, very difficult. Right? It's very, very difficult to fathom what is going on, because a lot of what goes on in the Torah is extremely vague. And it's vague for a number of reasons. One is, if we want to misinterpret it or make mistakes, we have the ability to do so. Doesn't God want us to be close to Him? Does He want us to reach our potential? He does, but He gives us free will. So free will means we can make a mistake. Free will means we can be misled. Free will means our own hearts, our own inclinations can make us go astray. And the repercussions could be catastrophic. So in these cases of euthanasia, people have the right idea. They have the right thought. It's coming from the wrong place. I'm not saying their intentions are cruel. Their intentions can be 100% pure. But if it doesn't come from a place where everything that they do has God written all over it, that they are doing everything in God's will to be God-fearing Jews, that's what our goal is. Anything second of that, you're in control, your evil inclinations in control of you. So something like that, you pull the plug, you shut off someone's pacemaker, you think you're doing the right thing, you're helping the person. At the end, you're really causing them harm. You quicken their death, you murdered them. Murder is a serious offense. And it doesn't matter how it's done. There's no good way. Whether it's extra morphine, whether you pull the plug, throw someone off a cliff, in the Torah's eyes, it's all bad. And it's all wrong. So you take the greatest generation of that time, in the history of man, their heart was in the right place. Did they believe this was a God? No. Were they interested in sacrificing to it? No. But they made a fundamental mistake. And the fundamental mistake was, Moshe Rabbeinu's not here. We want a leader. We want an intermediary. That is the fundamental mistake. That they think this thing has power. Even though they believe that God has true power. But He's just too lofty to deal with us. So He'll give us someone else like Moshe Rabbeinu. Just an intermediary. Problem is, that's called idolatry. Even if they believe in God. That is what the novelty is over here. Because the reality is, why should that be idolatry? They believe in God. They believe He runs the world. They believe He can change nature. They believe He can do miracles. So He can also do this. They actually believed, as my Rebbe here points out, that was God's will. And the reality is, whose will was it? It was the evil inclination's will. The Malach HaMaves, right? The angel of death, the evil inclination. The S guy, whatever you want to call him. This is what he caused. And he made them make a fundamental mistake. Now we can understand maybe where the mistake came from. They're coming from a pure heart. It's coming from a pure place. It's just misguided. Or I can say it's coming from a pure place. If it's misguided, they made a mistake. They got fooled. The evil inclination fooled them. And they're dancing around thinking this is the greatest thing. This is what God wants. So we'll have this calf as an intermediary. Not that he's God. Not that he took him out of Egypt. They didn't forget Moshe that quick. Give him a few days, they'll forget him. But they didn't forget him so quick. So if they don't forget him so quick, it boggles the mind what in the world is going on over here. So the commentaries might explain, as my Rebbe here brings down, their evil inclination got the best of them. Even though they thought this was God's will, it was a major mistake. And they got fooled. And this is exactly what the evil inclination wanted. And this changed the world again. Back to where it was previously. Right? Not before man had eaten from the tree. That's it. That level is gone. We haven't come close to it. We won't come close to it until the evil inclination is totally destroyed. That will be when the Messiah comes. Right? Until that point, we're still holding at a very low level, much lower level. So the only way to try and raise that level is to be the best people we can, do the most mitzvahs we can. That is what we're trying to do. But I just want to point out with these, cases of euthanasia that a person can be fooled. Right? Their evil inclination can fool them. Can make them do things that they think is a mitzvah. They think it's a tremendous thing. They're helping the other person. They're saving him from future pain. When the reality is, the person's going to get to the next world and, this person says, all right, I suffered. Yeah, but they killed you. You had still more time. You still should have been there another week, another month, a few days, whatever. But now you're going to get punished. That was what you were, that suffering took away a tremendous amount of transgression. You could have made the transition to the next world much easier. But somebody killed you! That's bad. Nobody wants to go through that. So that's why in any of these cases, when it's an end-of-life case, a person has to ask their local Orthodox rabbi what to do. What, according to the Torah, is permitted or not. Right? For a non-Jew also, that's called murder. Right? Non-Jews not allowed to do that either. Right? Certainly one of the 7 Noahide laws. So, God forbid we should have to go through this. But if someone did have to go through it, they have to know, according to the Torah, what they're allowed to do or what they're not allowed to do. They have to speak to an expert, who knows these laws. I'm not just giving you a little bit of information. No, it doesn't make me an expert by any stretch. Right? But you have to ask someone who knows. Someone who's an expert. Because otherwise, it's a fine line between you trying to, save someone from suffering and actually murdering them. And if you murder them, you may cause them tremendous harm. Forget, what it's going to do to you in the future. Right? But what about them? There's just many, many stories like this. That, people came out of it and, someone was in a coma, a bad car accident, was in a coma for years and years, and he kept hearing people saying, should we pull the plug, shouldn't pull the plug, this, that, but he couldn't do anything, couldn't say anything. And he's like screaming, but no one could hear him. He's like, I'm alive, don't do it. And eventually he came out of it. But again, what we see, we do not know. Now, we see what's in front of us, but we're not really seeing what it is. We're seeing things according to the way we see it. According to the way, us living in this world see it. Doesn't mean that's the way it is. That's why it's an upside down world. That's why it's an alama de shikra. It's a world of falsehood. Because that's what it is. We see all kinds of things. Makes no sense. So, as hard as it is, to understand, what this generation went through, and what the test was. At the end they were fooled. At the end they were misguided. And they made a tremendous mistake. And that is not something, so okay, they made a mistake, they changed the course of history. by what they did. Because the world was in a different place. They could have become much stronger. Maybe they wouldn't have had to go around, around the desert for 40 years before they entered the land. They could have been much stronger. There are a number of things that could have changed, over here. But their evil inclination got them. And that's, this cannot be, emphasized enough. We are affected by what we see. Billboards, pop-ups, videos, other things. People say I can watch what I want. Doesn't mean I have to act on it, this, that. But these messages that we're given, which probably most of them are bad, right? They make an imprint on the heart. They make an imprint in the soul. They don't disappear. You got to work really hard to get them out of your head. They don't disappear. So, we're doing it to ourselves, and we're getting not only mixed messages, but bad messages. So, a person can say, well, I know how to handle it. I'm older, I'm more mature, I'm this, I'm that. Yeah, maybe. But, out of all the messages that you're given, let's say, over a certain amount of time, you're given 10 messages. I would venture to say probably 8 or 9 are going to be against Torah. Just a guess. I won't say 10 out of 10. That'd be a little bit too much. Right? But it's going to be a very high number that are antithetical to Torah. Can you get a lot of good information? Yeah. Can you get a lot of bad information? Yeah. And the bad information will kill you more than the good information will help you. Why? Because we'll get distracted. It's very easy to get distracted in all kinds of things, right? I speak about it a lot. I won't speak about it now. But it's very easy. And the evil inclination in this day is very, very strong. You'll say, oh, it's stronger than it was, in previous generations. In every generation, there was an evil inclination for something. Right? Whatever it was. Today, it's all about doing what I want. It's all about freedom. And it's all about, what I do doesn't matter. And I have free choice. So, who cares? Let me do what I want. There's so much out there, that's bad for this generation. It's enough to say stay away from bad. Things that are bad. But there's an extra thing. It says also do good, as it says in Tehillim, as it says in Psalms. Surmei Rava Asei Tov. He's talking about Lashon Hara. Right? Not speaking Lashon Hara. So go away from the bad, and then do good. So I'll say tongue-in-cheek, this generation, if you stay away from bad, you're already doing very good. You also do good, that's extra. Right? That's definitely extra. Because this is an incredibly weak generation. So, we have to be stronger. We have to work harder. But if we let the street come in, we are going to be like the street. So we have to be careful. And even if we think we're doing the right thing and we're looking at the right things and this and that, it can also be a tremendous Yetzer Hara. It can also be bad for your soul. Even though on paper it may look good. But it may convince you to do other things. And if it does, that's bad. Can it be dressed up and wrapped in a product that, comes to convince you to do things you shouldn't do 100%? The person has to have his guard up 100% of the time. Even when you're sleeping. Even when you're watching this video. You got to be careful. Because what we see 100% affects us. And even if it's coming from the purest part of our soul, and we really want to do the right thing, and we really believe in the right cause, it could be totally wrong. How many people out there believe in their heart of hearts they're doing the right thing, and the thing is totally against Torah? I'm not talking about, people have weird desires or whatever. I'm talking about people who have altruistic values, but they're just skewed. They're misrepresented. They're misused. So in that sense, you can have all the altruistic values you want. If it's against the Torah, I don't care what your intention is. It's wrong. Now, this is not me. I'm talking what the Torah says and how we understand it. You can say, what do you think? Doesn't matter what I think. It's irrelevant what I think. Is it permissible or is it not permissible? If it's not permissible, then it's forbidden. And if it's forbidden, it's not what the Torah wants. Regardless of what altruistic values that a person may have. And this people have difficulty with. Because they say, how do I know things are true? How do I know, saving the whales isn't a bad thing? So I'm not saying it's necessarily a bad thing. Question is, if you make it into idolatry or not. It can come from altruistic values. But it may go against what the Torah says. So what's better? So Torah is obviously better. That's why, everybody needs a teacher, needs a guide. To see if what they're doing is going in the right direction or not. And it could be even the wisest of people. They also need someone to bounce ideas off. Because maybe they're biased themselves. Maybe they think it's a good thing. And maybe it's not. Right? Maybe it's an evil inclination taking them astray. Right? We always have to be careful. In everything we do. Otherwise, what we think, in essence, is a mitzvah. The reality is, you're going against a essential element of what the Torah is built on. And that we don't want to do, right? Nobody wants to do that. Because if people say, I don't care what the Torah says, I'll do what I want, so that's the Torah made their own image. They want to do what they want and have no repercussions. Well, that's not what the Torah says. Torah says there are repercussions. God says there are repercussions. And if you don't do what you're supposed to do, you're going to pay. And then people will say, all right, so I'll pay. At least I'm going to enjoy myself. If people understood what the next world was, and what goes on, and what reward and punishment looks like, they wouldn't be so stupid to open their mouth so quick. Someone once told me, they said, when I die, I'm going 6 feet under. I said, I hope for your sake you're right, because if I'm right, you're in big trouble. If there's reward and punishment, you're in big trouble. So I'll take my chances. So I'll say like this. A person's in a place, there are 1,000 doors. Behind one door in 1,000 is the worst death you could ever imagine. It's a 1 in 1,000 chance. Want to take the chance? Pull the door. Because there's like 0.0001% chance I'm going to get the door with the worst death. You want to play Russian roulette? Alright, Russian roulette's different. That's like with 6 bullets. 8 bullets. 1 out of 8. You got a 10% chance. Yeah, there are people who play it because they're stupid. Take the chance. What happened? Boom. That's it. If that's the case in this world, you can only imagine what that would be in the next. Because if you don't know, you can say that. But if you ever heard anyone tell what goes on in the next world, if they had an out-of-body experience, all you have to do is Google it, see some videos of what people had, when they had this out-of-body experience, what they experienced. And they all say the same thing, Jew or non-Jew. What it's like. Seeing their life flash before their eyes, their soul hovers above the body, they go through this tunnel, they see this light, etc., etc. They all say the same thing. What a coincidence. So, when they come back and talk about, punishment and other things, does that change us? It should. Get a glimpse. Get a very small glimpse into the next world. Of what that is. So they say, well, I'll take my chances. I'll play Russian roulette. Okay? It's sad. It's tragic. But people have no idea. This is what lack of education is. Lack of education says, it doesn't matter. Who cares? I'll enjoy myself now. Eat, drink, and be merry, lest tomorrow I die. They're playing with their future. And they'll say, okay, I'll take my chances. You have a bigger portion, I have a less portion. It's not just about what a poor person's portion looks like. It's about payback. It's about what we did in this world. What we're going to get. Measure for measure. You want to play Russian roulette, that's your choice. I definitely wouldn't recommend it. Certainly not healthy, and it's certainly not a Torah way to look at the world. I want to remind people, I also have a Intro to Kabbalah class, which I give every Tuesday night, 9 o'clock. We're speaking about prophecy and divine inspiration, or divine inspiration and prophecy. I also have a course. It's called Discovery of Biblical Path. It's about people coming out of idolatry, and they don't know which way to turn, whether it be a Noahide or to be or to convert. So I have 6 modules about finding a rabbi, finding a community, what it means to be a Noahide, and the holidays and the life cycle for a Jew, with 7 interviews of people that either converted in the middle of conversion or people who stayed as Noahides. You can find that on my Facebook page, Beyond Orthodox Conversion to Judaism, my blog, orthodoxconversion.com. I also have Noahide classes as well, and twice a week on Tuesday morning and Thursday afternoon, a Q&A session, question-answer session, where people can ask, whatever questions that they want. And anyone interested in contacting me can contact me at rabbichaimcoffman@gmail.com, RABBICHAIMCOFFMAN @gmail.com. Wishing everyone a great Shabbos.